What if the mountain you were climbing knew every secret you've ever kept, and whispered them back to you in the dark? The bus rattled along the winding road, its headlights cutting swaths through the mist as it crawled up the narrow path toward Whispering Peak. The group of college students inside was buzzing with energy, jokes, chatter, nervous laughter, all blending into a background hum. Their professor, Dr. Callahan, had organized this hiking expedition as part of their wilderness survival course, and the students treated it as both a test and an adventure. The mountain loomed above them, shrouded in clouds that looked like coiling smoke, its peak hidden from view. Emily sat by the window, her hands wrapped around the straps of her backpack. She wasn't as enthusiastic as the others. The stories about Whispering Peak had stuck with her, tales of sudden storms that came out of nowhere, hikers vanishing without a trace, and those strange accounts of voices in the wind. She told herself it was just folklore, exaggerated over the years, but when the bus finally stopped at the trailhead and the doors opened, a cold gust of air rushed inside carrying the faintest echo of words? No, probably just the wind. The group spilled out, shouldering their packs and adjusting their gear. There were 10 students total, plus Dr. Callahan, a wiry man in his 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He gave them a brisk rundown of the trail, rules, and safety measures. His voice carried authority, but even he glanced uneasily at the peak veiled in mist. The hike began smoothly enough. The first stretch wound through dense pine forest, the air damp with the scent of moss and earth. Laughter carried easily as they moved in clusters, Mark and Jason cracking jokes at the back, while Emily walked near her friend Natalie, who had been her roommate since freshman year. The trees thinned as the path climbed, revealing glimpses of jagged rock faces and ravines that disappeared into shadow. Above, the clouds churned like a restless sea. By late afternoon, they reached a plateau where they would make camp for the night. The group set up tents, collected firewood, and prepared a modest meal. The mood was light, though the wind never truly settled. It whistled through the rocks, carrying odd notes, like faint sighs or distant conversations. Emily shivered more than once, though Natalie teased her for being too creeped out by ghost stories. As night fell, the fire crackled brightly, pushing back the dark. The students sat in a circle, trading stories, some funny, others scary. The professor retired early, muttering something about an early start in the morning. The laughter helped, but the mountain had a way of intruding, of reminding them where they were. Every gust of wind sounded almost deliberate, as though it circled the camp, testing the boundaries of their courage. Then, just as Mark was in the middle of telling a ghost story, the wind carried a voice. Clear, sharp, undeniable. "Natalie doesn't trust you, Emily." The fire sputtered. The circle went silent. Natalie blinked, staring at Emily, whose face drained of color. What?" Natalie stammered, looking around. "Who said that?" But everyone had heard it. A whisper, but too distinct to mistake for wind. Emily's heart hammered. That wasn't me," she said quickly, glancing at her friend. Jason forced a laugh, though it sounded strained. "Come on, that's freaky." "Probably just an echo. Mountains do weird things with sound." But Emily knew. That voice, it had sounded eerily like her own, but warped, stretched by the wind. And the words cut too deeply, too specifically, to be random. They tried to shake it off, but the mood had soured. Conversations faltered, glances lingered too long, suspicion crept in where there had been camaraderie. When they finally retreated to their tents, the whispers did not stop. They came in fragments, carried on every gust. Mark lied about why he's here. Jason took something that wasn't his. "Emily, you know what you did." Each whisper revealed something sharper, darker, as though the mountain was peeling them open, layer by layer. Emily pressed her hands over her ears, but the words seeped through, like they weren't just in the air, they were inside her head. She turned to Natalie in the dim light of their shared tent, whispering, "Did you hear that too?" Natalie's eyes gleamed in the dark, wide and frightened. "Yes." "Anne." "Emily, it's not lying." The words froze her blood. Outside, the wind howled, but beneath it, like a chorus rising, came laughter. Low, distant, and hungry. The mountain isn't just whispering random things. It knows their secrets, and worse, it's using those secrets to tear them apart. The night stretched on in a suffocating weight, each hour dragging with an unnatural heaviness. Emily lay wide awake inside her tent, staring at the thin fabric wall that quivered with every gust of mountain wind. The whispers hadn't stopped. They came and went in waves, sometimes faint and indistinct, like a crowd murmuring just out of reach, and other times so sharp and personal that she could swear someone was crouched right outside, hissing secrets through the seams. Natalie had pulled her sleeping bag tight up to her chin, but Emily could tell by the tense way her friend's body shifted and stiffened that she wasn't asleep either. Every now and then, Natalie flinched, as though hearing words Emily couldn't. At some point, Emily couldn't take the silence between them anymore. "Natalie," she whispered, her throat dry. "What did you mean, earlier? When you said it wasn't lying?" Her friend didn't answer right away. The fabric of the tent rippled with the cold wind, and the fire outside had long since burned out, leaving their campsite in total darkness. Finally, Natalie whispered back, voice almost too soft to hear, "Because I don't trust you. Not fully. Not since last year." Emily's stomach lurched. Her mind raced through possibilities. What incident, what moment, what suspicion had taken root in Natalie's head? She wanted to deny it, to defend herself, but the words tangled in her throat. Because maybe Natalie was right. Maybe she had given her reason to doubt. And the most terrifying thing was how the mountain knew. A sudden flash of light cut through the thin walls of the tent, followed by a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to split the night in two. Rain began almost instantly, a relentless drumming that battered the canvas as though the sky itself had ruptured. The storm came down with such violence that for a moment, Emily thought the tent might collapse. She unzipped the flap and peeked out. The other tents were swaying, bending under the wind, their stakes straining against the soaked ground. She could hear the others shouting over the roar, their voices panicked and fractured. Dr. Callahan's voice rose above the chaos, barking orders for everyone to stay inside, to hold tight until the worst of it passed. But the wind seemed to mock him, howling louder, carrying more whispers threaded between the gusts. Emily thought she heard her own name, her father's voice, and then a sharp accusation that made her reel, "You left her to die." The words stung like a knife through the ribs. She stumbled backward into the tent, clutching her chest. "What did it say?" Natalie asked, eyes wide with fear. Emily shook her head, unable to repeat it. The storm pressed harder, and then another voice cut through, Jason's, shouting from somewhere outside his tent. "Shut up. Stop saying that. That's not true." His scream was half rage, half despair, and it was followed by the sound of frantic rustling, like someone trying to escape their shelter. Mark's voice bellowed next, "Jason. Stay inside, man. It's the mountain, it's screwing with you." But Jason didn't listen. Emily could hear the muffled thud of boots against wet ground, the sound of a zipper torn open, and then a figure darted into the storm. The rain swallowed him almost instantly, his outline dissolving into shadow. Dr. Callahan cursed, ordering everyone to stay put. But Mark was already outside, chasing after Jason, yelling his name into the night. The rest of the group erupted in confusion, some calling for them to come back, others crying that the storm would kill them. Emily gripped Natalie's arm tightly, terror building inside her. And then, cutting through the storm, came Jason's scream. Not of anger this time, but pure, blood-chilling terror. It carried across the plateau, high and broken, before being swallowed by the wind. Mark's shout followed, sharp and panicked, and then both voices were gone. Just the storm, just the whispers threading through it like invisible barbs. The professor stumbled past their tent, flashlight beam jittering wildly as he scanned the rain-soaked clearing. "Stay inside," he roared, though his voice cracked with strain. He disappeared into the downpour, chasing after the missing students. Minutes stretched on, agonizingly slow. Emily sat frozen, hands trembling in her lap, listening to the whispers weaved tighter around the camp. They weren't vague anymore, they were intimate, suffocating, unraveling every hidden corner of her mind. She heard Natalie's whispered betrayal again, her father's disappointment, and that same accusing line repeating like a mantra, "You left her to die." Tears burned in her eyes. She wanted to scream, to cover her ears, to run. But where could she run? The mountain was endless, its storm an iron cage, and the whispers followed no matter what she did. Suddenly, the tent flap ripped open, and Mark stumbled inside, soaked to the bone, his flashlight shaking in his hand. His face was ghostly pale, his breath ragged. "Jason's gone," he said, voice hollow. I tried, but," his eyes darted toward the ground as if afraid to finish. "The mountain took him." Natalie gasped, covering her mouth. Emily stared at him, the words refusing to make sense. The mountain took him? What did that even mean? But the look on Mark's face told her everything she needed to know. Jason wasn't coming back. The storm raged on outside, though the thunder now sounded like laughter rolling across the peaks. The group was already smaller, fractured, breaking apart piece by piece. And the night was only beginning. Emily looked into Mark's eyes, and for the briefest moment, she thought she saw something move in them, like a reflection, not of the flashlight, but of something watching, inside him. Her breath caught in her throat. Outside, the whispers rose again, louder this time, as if emboldened by Jason's disappearance. "One down," they murmured. "Many more to go." Morning came, though the storm had left its scars across the camp. The rain had soaked everything through, tents sagged with water, the ground had turned to thick, sucking mud, and the fire pit was nothing but a pool of ash and sludge. The group emerged slowly, hollow-eyed and silent, each carrying the weight of a sleepless night. The air still carried the echo of whispers, though faint now, like the mountain was resting, satisfied after its feast. But no one dared to say the name Jason aloud, as if speaking it would summon the truth of his absence too fully. Dr. Callahan returned just after sunrise, his clothing torn and mud-caked, his face gaunt with exhaustion. He gathered them around what was left of the fire pit, his jaw tight, voice clipped. "Jason is gone," he said. No preamble, no sugarcoating. "I searched until dawn. The rain washed away everything. There's no sign of him. He's not coming back." A ripple of grief and fear spread through the students, but Callahan didn't let them wallow. "This mountain plays tricks. Sound carries, storms come fast, and fear makes people careless. That's all this is. We can't let it break us. We stick together, we move carefully, and we get down safely. Understood?" No one answered. The silence was thicker than the fog curling between the rocks. Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to the rational explanation, but she couldn't forget Jason's scream. That hadn't been the cry of someone lost or panicked. That had been the sound of someone consumed. They packed in tense silence, each student moving with mechanical precision. Mark avoided eye contact, his face pale and drawn, his movements jerky. Natalie stuck close to Emily, though her earlier confession, that she didn't trust her, still lingered like poison in Emily's chest. The others muttered in pairs, their voices clipped and suspicious, as though every word might betray something dangerous. The climb continued, though the trail was slick and treacherous. Clouds hung low, cloaking the mountain in a shifting veil of gray. Every gust of wind seemed to carry a voice, sometimes indistinct, sometimes sharp and cutting. "He's lying to you. She's not who you think. They know what you did." The whispers gnawed at them. Mark stumbled more than once, muttering under his breath, and once Emily caught him glaring at Dr. Callahan with something close to hatred. Natalie squeezed Emily's arm when the path narrowed, but even her touch felt changed, less supportive, more possessive, as though she feared being abandoned. By mid-afternoon, they reached a rocky outcrop where the professor called for a break. The group dropped their packs, exhausted, shivering in the thin, damp air. Emily sat apart, staring at the jagged peaks still hidden in storm clouds. She felt the weight of the mountain pressing down, not just physically, but inside her head, probing for cracks. That was when she heard it again, clear as day, right at her ear, "You left her to die." Her breath caught. She snapped her head around, but no one was there. The others were scattered, too far away to have whispered so close. Her chest tightened, memories flashing unbidden, her younger sister, the icy lake, the scream, her frozen body refusing to move as help arrived too late. Emily's vision blurred with tears. She had buried that memory deep, spoken of it to no one. Not even Natalie knew. Yet the mountain had reached inside her, dug it up like a grave being torn open. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the voice only grew louder. You let her drown. You stood there and did nothing. Natalie crouched beside her, worry etched across her face. Emily? What's wrong? Emily shook her head violently, trying to force the words away, but Natalie grabbed her shoulders. Tell me, she demanded. Her eyes gleamed too bright, too sharp. What did it say? What did you do? Emily's lips trembled. She wanted to deny it, to shove the truth back into the shadows where it belonged, but the whispers didn't allow denial. They pushed, they pressed, they burrowed deeper, until she almost screamed just to let it out. Before she could speak, Mark's voice cut through the thin air. He stood a few feet away, his expression twisted with fury. She's hiding something, he said flatly. I can hear it too. She's guilty. The group turned, their faces pale and tight with suspicion. Dr. Callahan barked at Mark to sit down, but the professor's authority felt weaker now, like a rope fraying under too much strain. Mark stepped closer, his eyes locked on Emily. The mountain shows us what's true. It knows. And he jabbed a finger at her. She's the weak link. If we keep her with us, it'll use her to take the rest of us down. Natalie flinched, torn between her friend and the fear gnawing at her own mind. Emily shook her head desperately. That's not true. It's twisting everything. But her voice sounded thin, brittle. Even she wasn't sure she believed it anymore. Dr. Callahan moved between them, raising his hands. Enough. The mountain doesn't know anything. It's just wind, just fear. We don't turn on each other, we hold together, or we're finished. The words rang hollow against the silence that followed. Emily saw it in their faces, doubt, mistrust, the seed already planted and growing fast. As they resumed their climb, the group moved more distantly, space opening between them like fractures in stone. Mark lingered at the back, muttering, while Natalie walked stiffly at Emily's side, her silence louder than words. Even Dr. Callahan's eyes flicked toward Emily with something like unease. When they set camp that night, the whispers returned with greater force. They didn't just accuse now, they demanded. Confess. Admit it. Tell them the truth. The voices circled the camp like predators, their words sharper than the wind. And as the fire burned low, Emily realized with growing horror that the mountain wasn't just feeding on their secrets, it was feeding on the tension those secrets created. Every doubt, every suspicion, every fracture in their trust was fuel. The more they unraveled, the stronger it became. The storm clouds above rumbled again, and in the shadows beyond the firelight, Emily swore she saw shapes moving, figures made of mist and darkness, watching, waiting. And then the whisper came, so loud it felt like it was spoken directly from the mountain itself. One by one, until none remained. The fire burned low that night, reduced to little more than glowing embers that cast weak orange light over the huddled group. The storm had passed, leaving behind a strange, unsettling stillness that pressed in from every direction. It wasn't silence, not truly. The mountain breathed in its own way, groaning timbers of the trees swaying in the wind, the faint crackle of shifting rocks in the cold, and, threaded through it all, those whispers that slithered through the air like smoke. None of them spoke for a long while. The fire was a fragile barrier between them and the darkness, and no one wanted to risk disturbing it. Emily sat close to Natalie, but even that closeness felt tenuous. Natalie's gaze rarely left her, sharp and searching, like a detective waiting for a confession. Mark had withdrawn to the far edge of the circle, crouched with his arms locked around his knees, eyes flicking constantly from one person to another. He looked like an animal on the verge of snapping. The professor was the only one who tried to maintain the illusion of control, poking at the fire, arranging logs with unnecessary precision, muttering under his breath as though order could be restored through ritual. But the mountain had already sunk its claws into them. Order was nothing but a brittle lie. The whispers grew bolder as the night deepened. They no longer confined themselves to accusations but now spoke in fragmented commands. Push him. Strike her. Don't trust them. Don't sleep. It was impossible to tell whether the words were meant for all of them or if the mountain was whispering different poisons into each ear. Sometimes Emily saw the others flinch at nothing, eyes darting wildly, lips tightening as though swallowing back responses to invisible voices. At one point, Mark suddenly stood, his face pale in the firelight. "We can't stay here," he said flatly. "We can't stop. If we sit still, it'll pick us off. One by one. You heard it." "Sit down," Dr. Callahan ordered, his tone clipped. Mark shook his head violently. "No. You don't understand. It knows us. It knows what we've done. And it won't stop until it has all of us." His eyes flicked to Emily. Especially her. Emily's heart pounded, but before she could respond, Natalie spoke, her voice colder than Emily had ever heard it. "What did it show you, Emily?" Emily froze. Everyone's eyes were on her now, the fire painting their faces in harsh strokes of shadow and flame. Her throat tightened, the memory of her sister clawing at her chest. She wanted to scream that it wasn't her fault, that she had been just a child, frozen with fear, but the mountain's whispers were already twisting the memory, turning hesitation into guilt. Her voice cracked. She couldn't do it. She couldn't confess, not here, not with their stares cutting into her like knives. Mark's lips curled into something close to a sneer. "Thought so. She's poisoned. The mountain's inside her. That's why it's stronger now." "Enough!" Callahan barked, rising to his feet. His shadow loomed over them, a silhouette trembling against the firelight. "We're exhausted. We're frightened. That's all this is. The mountain isn't cursed, it's just playing tricks with our senses. Tomorrow, we descend. No arguments." But his words fell flat. No one truly believed him anymore, not even Callahan himself. Emily saw it in the way his hand trembled when he reached for the firewood, how his gaze lingered too long on the dark edge of the forest. The night stretched thin and restless. Sleep came to some in fleeting, uneasy snatches, but Emily couldn't close her eyes. Every time she tried, she saw water, her sister's pale hands reaching up through the ice, and the whispers chanting her name like a funeral dirge. Sometime in the dead hours before dawn, a scream tore through the camp. Emily bolted upright, heart slamming in her chest. The sound had come from the treeline just beyond their tents. Mark was gone. They found him thrashing in the undergrowth, tangled in branches, his face pale and wild with terror. He clawed at his own arms, shrieking, "Get them off! Get them off me!" Deep, bloody scratches ran from shoulder to wrist, as though invisible hands were tearing him apart. The others hesitated, too afraid to get close, but Callahan rushed forward, grabbing him by the shoulders. "Mark! There's nothing there! Stop!" But Mark only screamed louder, eyes rolling white, his body convulsing as though something was pulling him down into the earth itself. Emily caught a glimpse, just for a second, of shadowed figures swirling around him, shapes made of mist and smoke, their whispers overlapping into a hideous chorus. And then Mark went still. His body slumped against Callahan, who staggered under the weight. The professor lowered him gently to the ground, but the damage was already done. Mark's eyes were open, glassy, his chest unmoving. Natalie sobbed, clapping her hands over her mouth. One of the other students muttered a prayer. The fire sputtered as though struggling to breathe, and the wind picked up, carrying a fresh wave of whispers that hissed in triumph. Callahan sat back on his heels, his face hollow with shock. We can't stay. We have to keep moving." Emily's stomach churned. Two gone. Jason swallowed by the storm, Mark torn apart by whispers. And the mountain was stronger now, its hunger growing with every life it claimed. she realized with a terrible certainty that descending might not even matter. The peak had already chosen them. When the group finally returned to camp, dragging Mark's body back like a broken effigy, no one spoke. They laid him down beside the fire, covering his face with a torn blanket, and tried to sit as if things were normal. But nothing was normal anymore. The mountain's hold was absolute, its whispers thrumming in their very bones. That night, Emily didn't even try to sleep. She sat upright, staring at the fire, waiting for the next scream. The others twitched in restless half-sleep, and she wondered how long it would be before the whispers pushed one of them over the edge. And then, just before dawn, she heard it, a new voice among the whispers. It was faint, broken, but unmistakable. "Emily, help me, why did you let me drown?" Her sister's voice. The flames guttered low, shadows stretching tall, and Emily knew with sickening clarity that the mountain wasn't just feeding on secrets anymore, it was calling back the dead. The morning after Mark's death bled into the cold air with no warmth, no sun, only a gray pall that seemed to stretch endlessly across the sky. The mountain had swallowed color itself, everything looked muted, washed in the same lifeless shade. The group moved like ghosts through camp, their faces drawn, eyes hollowed, and movements stripped of energy. No one mentioned Mark as they packed up their gear. His body remained behind, wrapped in the torn blanket, a silent reminder of how little control they had. They couldn't carry him, not up, not down. Callahan's voice had been low but firm, "We have to keep moving. If we stay, none of us will leave." Emily felt every word sting like betrayal, though she knew the professor was right. Leaving Mark there, alone, on that cursed slope, it wasn't just cruel. It was another offering to the mountain. The trail downward was narrow, slick with moss and damp soil, the kind of path where one misstep could send someone tumbling into nothingness. The group moved single file, tense, their packs digging into their shoulders. Every gust of wind carried more whispers, weaving between them, some sharp, others murmured, but each one aimed like a blade. Emily kept her eyes fixed on the ground ahead, though her sister's voice kept echoing in her skull, "Why did you let me drown?" It wouldn't stop. Sometimes it was a whisper, faint and broken, other times it was a full sob, raw with betrayal. And Emily couldn't shut it out. Even plugging her ears did nothing, the voice came from inside her, worming through her mind like a parasite. She stumbled more than once, nearly falling, each slip earning her sharp glances from Natalie. By mid-afternoon, the path had grown worse, jagged rocks forcing them to climb down with hands and knees. The forest thinned into twisted, wind-battered pines, their limbs scratching like claws against the gray sky. Dr. Callahan called for a halt, his face pale with exhaustion. "We're losing daylight," he said. "We need to set camp before we risk another storm." No one argued, though Emily could see the dissent in their eyes. The mountain wasn't letting them go. They all knew it. They set up camp on a flat clearing carved into the slope, though the ground was uneven and damp. The tents went up silently, each person lost in their own battle against the whispers. When night fell, the fire sputtered and hissed as though the wood itself resisted burning. The group huddled close, though the closeness no longer felt safe. It felt forced, like prey animals clinging together in the shadow of a predator. That was when Natalie broke the silence. "I heard my brother last night," she whispered, staring into the flames. Her voice shook. "He was calling for me. He said he was cold. He said it was my fault." Emily turned to her, startled, but Natalie's eyes were locked on the fire, unblinking. "He drowned when I was 12. I was supposed to be watching him at the lake." I looked away for just a second, her voice cracked. "And now he won't stop calling me. He's here. I can hear him." The fire popped sharply, and for a moment, Emily swore she heard another child's cry rise on the wind, a thin, desperate wail that made her skin crawl. Natalie buried her face in her hands, rocking back and forth. The professor leaned forward, his tone firm but fraying at the edges. "The mountain is preying on our grief. That's all this is. Echoes, manipulations. They're not real." But his words rang hollow, and Emily could see it in the way his jaw trembled, his knuckles white as he gripped his knees. He was hearing something too. He just wouldn't admit it. The night deepened, dragging with it a suffocating heaviness. Sleep came in fractured shards, punctuated by sudden starts and phantom voices. Emily woke at one point to the sound of sobbing just outside her tent. She froze, heart hammering, listening. The sobs grew louder, ragged and wet, like someone gasping for breath through water. Slowly, she unzipped the tent and peered out. The clearing was dark, the fire reduced to glowing coals. The trees beyond swayed in the wind, their shadows long and jagged. And there, at the very edge of the fire's reach, stood a figure. It was small, childlike, with dripping hair that clung to its pale face. Its head was bowed, shoulders trembling with sobs. Emily's chest constricted. She knew that shape. She would know it anywhere. Her sister. Emily, the voice was wet and broken, as though water still filled her lungs. The figure raised its head, revealing eyes that gleamed with unnatural light, and a smile stretched across its face, too wide, too sharp. "Come play with me." Emily gasped, stumbling backward, but the figure vanished in the blink of an eye. Only the trees remained, swaying in silence. She scrambled back into the tent, clutching at Natalie, shaking her awake. "I saw her," Emily whispered, her voice raw with terror. "She was here. She was right there." Natalie stared at her, wide-eyed, her own face streaked with tears. "I saw him too," she said hoarsely. "My brother. He was in the trees." They clung to each other then, trembling, whispering desperate denials even as the truth pressed heavier against them. The mountain wasn't just whispering anymore, it was shaping their grief, pulling their dead from memory and giving them form. By dawn, they were shells of themselves. No one had slept, not really. The professor urged them forward, though his own face was hollow, his eyes rimmed red as if he'd spent the night crying. He didn't explain, and no one asked. The descent continued, but the trail had shifted. Paths they had taken yesterday were gone, replaced by new routes that seemed to circle back on themselves. The mountain was rearranging itself, trapping them within its labyrinth. Every step downward only led them deeper. By afternoon, Emily realized with a sick twist in her gut, they weren't descending anymore. The trees were thinning, the air growing thinner, the peak looming closer. No matter how carefully Callahan navigated, the mountain was pulling them upward, dragging them toward its heart. That night, Emily didn't wait for sleep. She sat by the fire, watching the trees. And when the whispers rose again, a thought clawed its way into her mind, one she had been avoiding but could no longer push away. The mountain didn't want them to leave. It wanted them to stay. It wanted them to become part of it. The morning came, but it brought no relief, no light to chase away the horrors of the night. The sky was still choked with clouds that sagged heavily above the jagged slopes, giving the impression that the mountain itself was bending down to watch them. The air was thin, sharp in their lungs, and every breath burned. Emily could feel it in her bones, this wasn't just altitude sickness. The mountain was draining them, hollowing them out piece by piece, as though preparing them for something. Dr. Callahan tried to sound steady as he directed them along the trail, but his voice cracked more often than not. His map was useless now. The landmarks didn't match, the paths twisted back on themselves. The mountain was alive, and it was reshaping itself to keep them climbing higher. Still, no one dared to defy him. Moving felt safer than stopping, though every step carried them deeper into its grasp. Natalie stayed close to Emily, though their conversations had thinned into clipped, whispered fragments. Both were haunted by what they had seen the night before, their dead siblings given form, their grief made flesh. They didn't dare speak of it aloud for fear that doing so might summon them again. Yet Emily knew, deep down, that silence would not save them. By midday, the forest fell away, leaving them exposed on a barren ridge. The wind shrieked across the rocks, carrying with it voices that were clearer than ever. They weren't whispers anymore, they were cries, laughs, even fragments of song, overlapping into a cacophony that clawed at their sanity. One of the students, a lanky boy named Greg, suddenly clapped his hands over his ears and dropped to his knees, screaming. "They're in my head. They're inside me. Make them stop." Callahan rushed to him, but Greg scrambled backward like a cornered animal, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "They're children," he hissed. "I can hear them, dozens of them, hundreds. They're under the mountain. They're buried here, and they're calling for us. They want us to join them." The words sank into Emily like ice. She looked around, and for the first time noticed shapes moving in the periphery, small figures darting between the rocks, never quite visible, but present enough to make her skin crawl. Children. Dozens of them. Watching. Waiting. Greg bolted before anyone could stop him. He tore down the ridge, stumbling and sliding, his screams blending with the wind. "I won't join you. I won't." His voice faded into the distance until nothing remained but the shriek of the storm. They never saw him again. The group pressed onward in silence, each step heavier than the last. Emily's eyes kept catching glimpses of movement in the rocks, little hands, pale faces, eyes that glowed faintly in the gloom. Once, she felt something tug sharply at her pack strap, and when she spun, no one was there. Natalie whispered shakily, "They're following us. The mountain's children." The words lodged in Emily's chest like splinters. She couldn't deny it. These were not hallucinations, not tricks of the wind. The children were real, or at least, real enough to touch. Real enough to pull. By dusk, they stumbled into a plateau carved high into the mountain's side. It was flat, almost unnaturally so, as though something had smoothed the jagged stone. In the center stood a ring of stone cairns, dozens of them, each one stacked with eerie precision. The professor halted, his face ashen. This isn't natural," he muttered. "These are grave markers." Emily felt bile rise in her throat. The cairns weren't just random piles of stone. They were deliberate, arranged in a wide circle, and each one was small, no taller than her waist. Too small. Natalie clutched Emily's arm, her nails digging in. "Children," she breathed. As they stood frozen, the wind shifted, and the whispers rose into a chorus that seemed to come directly from the cairns. Soft, broken voices, calling for mothers, for fathers, for warmth. Emily staggered back, her knees weak. She wanted to run, but the air around them had thickened, pressing down, rooting them in place. Then, one by one, the cairns began to shift. Stones toppled, rolling across the plateau. From beneath them, thin hands clawed upward, pale, dirt-caked fingers scraping against the rocks. Emily's breath caught in her throat as small figures pulled themselves free, crawling out from their stone prisons. Children. Their faces were gray, hollow-eyed, their lips cracked and bleeding. Their clothes were tattered, frozen in the style of different eras, some modern, some decades old, others far older still. They surrounded the group silently, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, and then the whispers grew louder, layered into a single demand. "Stay with us." One of the students screamed, breaking the paralysis. He bolted for the trees, but a child moved faster than seemed possible, darting out and clutching his leg. The boy fell hard, his scream cutting short as more children swarmed him, their small hands covering his mouth, his eyes, pulling him into their circle. By the time the others rushed forward, he was gone, vanished into the earth as if the mountain had swallowed him whole. The group scattered back toward the center of the plateau, their panic raw and uncontained. Callahan's voice roared above the chaos. "Don't run. They want you to run." But his command had little weight now. Fear had stripped away all reason. Emily clung to Natalie, both trembling violently, as the children closed in again. Their whispers were deafening now, filling her skull until she thought her mind might split. Stay with us forever." She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for their cold hands to drag her down, when suddenly Callahan shouted, his voice breaking. "They're not alive. They're fragments, echoes. Don't believe them." Emily opened her eyes just enough to see the professor standing tall in the circle of cairns, his face pale but defiant. The children paused, their forms flickering like shadows under shifting light. For a moment, it seemed as though he might be right, that the children were illusions, feeding on their fear. But then one of them stepped forward. A girl no older than 8, with matted hair and eyes like glowing coals. She tilted her head, and her cracked lips curved into a smile too wide for her face. They said the same thing, the girl whispered, her voice sharp as glass. They didn't believe. Now they're with us. She pointed toward the cairns. Emily turned, and her blood ran cold. The cairns were no longer just piles of stone. They had changed. They looked like twisted, frozen forms, each one carved into the shape of screaming faces, hands clawing outward, mouths open in eternal silence. The mountain hadn't buried the children. It had kept them. The wind died suddenly, leaving the plateau in an oppressive, unnatural silence. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath, their skeletal limbs still against the gray sky. Emily pressed herself against Natalie, trembling, unable to tear her gaze away from the children circling the cairns. Their eyes glowed faintly, but it wasn't the soft luminescence of firelight, it was something colder, something that radiated intent. They weren't just observing, they were judging. Dr. Callahan stepped forward, hands raised in a vain gesture of authority. "We don't belong here," he said, his voice tight. "This isn't real. None of this is real. We're leaving. Now." A soft laugh rippled through the children, echoing unnaturally against the surrounding rocks. One girl, the same pale one with coal-like eyes, stepped closer. Her small hand reached upward, palm open, as though offering something Emily couldn't see. "They said the same," she whispered, voice sharp as broken glass. "They didn't want to leave. Now they are ours. You will stay too, or you will lose them." Emily's stomach twisted violently. She didn't understand. "Lose them," she whispered, voice barely audible. Natalie squeezed her arm in frantic agreement. "What do you mean?" The girl tilted her head. "The mountain chooses. One by one, it decides who will stay, and who will leave, as pieces of itself." Callahan's eyes widened. It's not alive," he muttered, though even he didn't sound convinced. "This is some kind of psychic phenomenon. Hallucinations. Fear made physical." But the children didn't wait for explanation. They moved with unnatural speed, darting closer, their small hands reaching toward Greg's empty place in the circle, marking their next victim. The whispers rose again, this time layered, weaving into a single chorus. "Choose, or be chosen." Emily felt her knees weaken. She realized instantly that the mountain wasn't just feeding on fear, it was hungry for something more. It wanted them to confess, to make bargains with their own guilt, their own secrets. It wanted them to submit. And the mountain had a way of rewarding compliance, or punishing hesitation. The first to falter was Jason's younger roommate, Liam. He broke into a trembling whisper, "I'll stay. I'll stay." "Just let her go," his words made Emily flinch. The mountain's bargain was simple: offer yourself, and perhaps your friends could survive. Hesitate, and you would all be claimed. Natalie's grip on Emily tightened. We can't do it," she hissed. "We can't give ourselves to this, whatever it is." The pale girl smiled, tilting her head. "It's not us. It's the mountain. We are its children. It will not harm you if you choose, willingly. But it will not wait forever." Emily swallowed hard, the memory of her sister's drowning clawing back into her mind. She thought of the whispers in the wind, of Jason screaming in the storm, of Mark torn apart. The mountain had already claimed too. And if she hesitated, there was no guarantee she wouldn't be next. Callahan stepped forward again, voice rising. "We don't negotiate with hallucinations. We leave, now." A gust of wind swept the plateau, slamming into him like a physical force. The children's laughter blended with it, high and broken, a chorus of dozens of unseen voices. The professor staggered backward, falling to his knees, and Emily realized with a horror that the mountain had heard him. It responds to defiance. Emily's eyes flicked to Natalie, then to the children. Every instinct screamed to run, but the path downward no longer existed, twisted by the mountain into an unrecognizable maze. The only choice was to engage, to bargain, to survive. She swallowed, her hands trembling as she stepped forward. I'll stay, she whispered, voice barely audible, though the weight of the words pressed like chains. The children paused, tilting their heads in unison. The wind seemed to shift, swirling around Emily like a living cloak. The pale girl's lips curved into a thin smile. Good, she said softly. The mountain will remember your choice. But it was a relief Emily felt. It was dread. Choosing herself didn't free her friends, it only postponed the inevitable. The mountain's bargain was never about mercy, it was about feeding. Every choice, every confession, only strengthened its hold. She realized with a cold certainty that the mountain didn't just want them, it wanted all of them. And once it had enough, it would never let them go. Natalie whispered Emily's name, eyes wide. You can't stay. Emily shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. I don't have a choice, she said, though she knew it was a lie. The mountain had stripped every option from them. The plateau shivered as though the mountain itself breathed, low and deep, and the children stepped closer. Each one was a fragment of past victims, their faces pale, eyes glowing, but now animated by the will of the peak itself. Their tiny hands reached toward the group, their whispers curling into a chant. Join us, join us, join us. Suddenly, one of the students screamed. He hadn't made a choice. He faltered, hesitated, and the mountain reacted. A force like icy water pulled him off his feet, dragging him toward the nearest cairn. The others screamed, rushing to grab him, but his body slipped like smoke through their fingers. The mountain claimed him in an instant. His voice rang out one last time, screaming for help, before silence swallowed it entirely. Emily's heart hammered. She realized the bargain was only half the story. Hesitate, and you are chosen. Submit, and you merely survive, for now. The mountain's hunger was endless, and it measured not just secrets, but fear, hesitation, and guilt. Every step they had taken, every confession, every whispered doubt, it all fed it. She looked around the plateau. The children's eyes glimmered, the cairns shifted slightly, almost breathing, as if the mountain itself were a living entity observing their every reaction. Emily understood the horrifying truth, there was no escape. The mountain didn't just whisper. It decided. And its next decision would fall on them. The plateau lay in a still, oppressive silence, the kind that pressed into bones and made every breath heavy. Emily's chest ached, not just from exhaustion but from the weight of knowing that every move they made was being watched, measured, and judged by the mountain. The children lingered at the edges of the plateau, pale, silent, their glowing eyes fixed on the group, their small hands twitching as if to reach again. Natalie gripped Emily's arms so tightly her nails dug into flesh. We have to keep moving, she whispered. We can't. A high, keening laugh cut her off. The wind shifted violently, carrying dozens of voices that all seemed to speak at once. You can run, but you cannot hide. Choose, or be chosen. Emily's stomach twisted violently. She had made her choice, or at least she thought she had, pledged herself to the mountain to keep Natalie and the others safe, but she now realized the bargain was far from complete. Submission didn't guarantee survival, it was just the first layer of the mountain's cruelty. Each second they hesitated, each doubt they allowed to grow, fed the power of the children, the whispering peak, and the invisible, living presence that ruled it. Dr. Callahan's voice rose sharply, cutting through the chaos. We move in pairs. One leads, the other covers. Stay together. If we scatter, we're finished. But even as he spoke, his gaze flicked toward the cairns, and Emily caught the trembling in his hands. Even he no longer believed the rules he tried to enforce. The mountain's whispers rose again, subtle now, threading through their thoughts. Pick first, pick now, or you will all fall. Greg, or at least the version of him that remained in their collective memory, was gone, and the group knew the mountain would not wait. Its children were patient, relentless, and above all, clever. They had watched for hesitation. They had chosen before, and they would choose again. "Emily," Natalie whispered, voice shaking, "we can't keep following him. We can't let him decide. We have to pick, we have to." Emily swallowed hard. She didn't want to speak the words. She didn't want to admit the truth to herself or anyone else, but the mountain had stripped away any delusions. Hesitation meant death. It wasn't about bravery, it was about control. And control now rested in the choices they made, or refused to make. Callahan took a deep breath, his eyes sweeping the plateau. "We have no choice. We will decide together who stays and who leads. That's the only way." The group huddled, faces pale and drawn. Even the strongest, most rational among them were cracking under the weight. Emily realized with sinking horror that the mountain's hunger extended beyond bodies. It craved guilt, fear, betrayal. Every ounce of fear they displayed fed it further. The pale girl from before stepped closer. Her small, glowing eyes bored into Emily. "Decide," she said softly, almost kindly, though the words made Emily's blood run cold. "Or the mountain will." The first to speak was Natalie, voice barely audible. "I'll go first," she whispered, stepping toward the cairns. Her hands shook, but she didn't falter. She knelt by the nearest stone pile, muttering something under her breath. Emily couldn't hear the words clearly, but she could feel the tension in the air shift slightly. The mountain was listening, waiting, gauging, calculating. Emily wanted to move, to drag Natalie back, to refuse the game entirely. But she couldn't. She realized then that the mountain's rules weren't optional. Hesitation would claim them instantly, one by one, and it didn't care about courage, morality, or protest. It only cared about fear, submission, and obedience. Callahan moved next, though more reluctantly. "I'll go too," he said, though his hands shook violently. The cairn accepted him silently. The pale girl nodded, stepping aside, and Emily could feel the mountain's presence tighten, pulling her forward, demanding her compliance. Jason and Mark were gone. Greg was gone. The whispers reminded her constantly that she wasn't immune, that no choice could save anyone completely. The mountain didn't play fair. The children didn't play fair. Everything was a test, and the cost of failure was final. Emily felt her sister's voice echo inside her skull again, sharp and accusing. "You left me, you let me drown." Her tears burned her cheeks, but she moved anyway, toward the nearest cairn, knowing it was both a submission and a protection. She whispered a single word under her breath, "I choose. I choose." The wind shifted violently. The children's eyes flickered, their hands twitching. Emily felt her entire body go rigid as the mountain seemed to exhale, drawing her in, measuring her resolve. She could feel the pressure of the plateau, the weight of every step she'd ever hesitated to take, the guilt she had carried for years, condensed into a single moment that could claim her entirely. But then something unexpected happened. Natalie's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. "We're still together," she whispered. Emily nodded, though the shaking in her body didn't stop. Even if they survived this step, the mountain would test them again. The mountain seemed to hum now, a low, vibrating sound that reverberated through Emily's bones. The children backed away slightly, though their eyes never left the group. The plateau shifted subtly, and Emily realized the mountain had accepted their partial compliance, but only partially. It was never about mercy. It was about fear, power, and control. And their fear was far from exhausted. The night pressed in, thick and suffocating. The whispers grew softer but more intimate, threading through Emily's mind. "You belong, all of you, eventually." Emily lay awake that night, staring at the dark, skeletal trees beyond the plateau. She understood with chilling clarity, the mountain didn't want just bodies. It wanted obedience, guilt, secrets, and fear, their very souls. And it would not stop, not until it had claimed them entirely. The plateau felt smaller with each step, though Emily couldn't explain why. The wind had shifted again, colder now, sharper, slicing across exposed skin like knives. Even the trees, twisted and skeletal, seemed to lean inward, guiding them upward. The mountain was no longer just a backdrop, it had become a living presence, each rock and boulder a sentinel, each gust of wind a whisper of judgment. Dr. Callahan led the group cautiously along a narrow, jagged ridge. The students moved in single file, their faces pale and taut, eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement in the periphery. Emily clutched her pack strap as though it were a lifeline, but even that sense of security was fleeting. Every step upward seemed to stretch the distance between them and safety, though the top of the peak was nowhere in sight. The mountain's heart lay beyond, and it was pulling them with irresistible force. Natalie walked beside her, voice low and trembling. "Emily, do you feel it? It's like the mountain knows what we're thinking. It knows what we fear." Emily swallowed hard, eyes scanning the ridge. "I know," she whispered. "It's alive. It's been watching us this whole time. Every doubt, every fear, it knows. And it's using us." They reached a narrow ledge where the mountain jutted sharply into the clouds. Below them, the cliffs fell away into nothing, the fog concealing the depth, hiding the edge of the world. Emily's stomach roiled as she realized that one misstep could mean the same fate as Greg or Mark, or worse. But even as terror threatened to paralyze her, she felt a pull, a magnetic tug guiding them forward. The mountain's heart was near. The whispers came again, layered and insistent. This time, they spoke in full sentences, voices overlapping yet coherent in a perverse chorus. "You are almost home. You belong here. Come closer, closer." Emily's pulse quickened. The words were intoxicating, like a lure pulling her towards some dreadful truth. She could almost feel the mountain breathing beneath her feet, each heartbeat vibrating through the stone, through her bones. The group crested a ridge, revealing a hollow carved deep into the mountain. Smoke, or maybe fog, swirled around the entrance, moving as though it had a mind of its own. The pale children were waiting there, lining the passage like sentinels. Their eyes glimmered, reflecting the gray light, faces eerily still. One of them stepped forward, the small figure of a boy, his head tilted in a silent, unnerving question. "Do you wish to see?" the boy whispered. His voice was impossibly soft, yet it resonated deep inside Emily's mind. "Do you wish to know the heart?" Emily's stomach clenched. She wanted to turn away, to flee, but she knew instinctively that the mountain would not allow it. There was no turning back. The heart demanded them. It called them by name, promised answers, demanded obedience, and whispered threats of eternal torment for hesitation. Dr. Callahan spoke then, his voice shaking despite his attempt at authority. "We have to know. We have to see it. There's no escaping this mountain, not without understanding it." The group hesitated at the threshold of the hollow. The air was thick, almost viscous, pressing against their skin and lungs. Emily could feel a vibration underfoot, a slow thrum that seemed in sync with her own heartbeat. The whispers intensified, now a cacophony of voices, some accusing, some pleading, some giggling like children at play. Natalie's hand found Emily's again, fingers trembling. "We shouldn't," she whispered. "We shouldn't go in. Something's wrong." Emily shook her head. "We have to. If we don't, it will take us anyway." They stepped into the hollow. The fog swallowed them immediately, damp and cold, clinging to skin and clothing. The temperature dropped sharply, and the faint glimmer of light ahead revealed shapes moving just beyond perception, twisted forms, faces that shifted like smoke, children whose bodies were incomplete, shadows of the living and the dead fused together. And then they saw it. At the center of the hollow, the mountain's heart pulsed like a living organism. It was a vast, dark mass, writhing and coiling, dotted with eyes that opened and closed independently. Its surface was like rock fused with flesh, veins pulsing with a dim red light. Whispers emanated from it directly, a voice that was 1,000 voices at once, seductive, commanding, accusing, laughing. Emily staggered backward, gasping. It's alive," she whispered. "Yes," Dr. Callahan murmured, his voice trembling. "It is, the mountain itself. It absorbs everything: fear, guilt, secrets, even life. The children scattered around the heart, kneeling, pressing their small palms against the pulsing mass. Some murmured, some sang softly, their voices weaving into the chorus of the mountain itself. Emily realized with a chill that the mountain's children were not just observers, they were conduits, extensions of the mountain's will, instruments in its hunger. One child stepped forward, a girl no older than 10, with eyes like coals and hair like spun shadow. She tilted her head, fixing Emily with an unblinking stare. "You will join us," she said softly. "You have no choice. But, you can offer yourself willingly. It will be easier." Emily felt her chest tighten. The mountain's pull was irresistible. It wasn't just a physical tug, it was psychological, emotional, spiritual. Every secret she had buried, every fear she had ignored, every guilt she had carried for years was laid bare. She could feel it being drawn out, torn from her by the living pulse beneath the mountain's skin. Natalie's voice broke through her terror. "Emily! Don't! Fight it!" Emily shook her head, knowing Natalie was right, but the fight was already happening inside her. The mountain demanded submission, and it was terrifyingly patient. Its hunger was endless, its reach infinite, and it had already claimed too many. The whispers reached a crescendo, voices overlapping in impossible harmony. "You belong. You belong. You belong." Emily took a shaky step forward. The hollow seemed to constrict, the pulsing heart stretching, reaching toward her. She knew the next choice would define their survival, or their complete annihilation. The hollow around them felt alive, pulsating in rhythm with Emily's own terrified heartbeat. The mountain's core throbbed like some grotesque organ, radiating a heat that was both suffocating and chilling at the same time. Its whispers filled every corner of her mind, overlapping with the ghostly voices of the children, the echo of her sister, and the guilt that had shadowed her for years. Every secret, every fear, every mistake she had ever made was laid bare, illuminated like a spotlight she could not escape. Emily's legs trembled, threatening to buckle under her. Natalie's hand gripped hers tightly, but it felt like clutching at smoke. The mountain's pull was inexorable. It wasn't enough that she had survived to this point, it demanded something more, something that tore deeper than flesh. The pale girl with coal-like eyes moved forward, her small steps silent against the stone floor. She extended her hand, palm open, and Emily felt her memories being pried loose, each one weighed and measured by the mountain. The girl spoke softly, impossibly calm. "Every secret, every regret, you will offer it. Or the mountain will take it from you." Emily's chest constricted. The memory of her sister drowned in the frozen lake rose unbidden, sharper than ever. "Why did you let me drown?" It wasn't just a voice now, it was a presence, icy and accusing, curling around her mind. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. The mountain didn't ask for excuses, it asked for confession. Dr. Callahan's face was pale, etched with terror, but he too was advancing, muttering under his breath. "The confession, it wants the truth, all of it. Fear isn't enough. You have to give it what it craves, your guilt, your shame, your deepest sins." Emily swallowed hard. She had no choice. The mountain's hunger was patient, unyielding. The whispers rose again, pressing into her skull. "Confess, or be consumed. Confess, or be consumed." She closed her eyes, taking a shuddering breath, and spoke, her voice cracking. I left her. I let her drown. I was supposed to save her, and I didn't. I froze. Her tears streamed down her face, words tumbling out in a torrent of confession, of years of guilt and torment, laid bare before the mountain. The heart pulsed violently in response, the children tilting their heads in unison, their expressions unreadable. Emily could feel the mountain's will probing deeper, stripping away every layer of defense, every buried thought, examining her completely. It was exhausting, terrifying, and intimate beyond comprehension. Natalie stepped forward, her own voice shaking as she confessed her long-buried shame, mistakes, and fears. The other students followed suit, one by one, their voices barely audible at first, then rising in trembling harmony with Emily's. The mountain didn't flinch, didn't pause, it only absorbed, collected, devoured. Then the whispers changed. They were no longer a chorus demanding confession, they were mocking, sharp and insistent. You think confessing saves you? You think truth is enough? Emily staggered back, gasping. The mountain's core began to shift, writhing like a living beast. The eyes scattered across its surface glimmered with intelligence, scanning the group, measuring who had faltered, who had hesitated, who still clung to fear or guilt. It wasn't enough that they confessed, the mountain wanted them broken. A small, skeletal child darted from the shadows and pressed against Emily's leg, whispering with a voice like cracking ice, your fear feeds us. You can never stop it. Never. Emily shrieked, stumbling backward, and the mountain responded instantly. Shadows flared along the walls of the hollow, rising to coil around her like serpents. Natalie grabbed her, pulling her upright, but the pressure was relentless, a tangible force pressing down from every direction. Dr. Callahan shouted something, but his words were lost in the roar of whispers. Emily realized then that the confession was not enough. The mountain didn't just take what they admitted, it wanted the truth they refused to speak, the thoughts they buried even deeper than their fears. Her mind raced, trying to reach into herself for anything untouched, unspoken. And there it was, the secret she had been hiding even from herself, a small, selfish choice she had made years ago that had indirectly caused pain to someone she loved. She choked back a sob and whispered it aloud, barely audible, I. Her lips quivered, but she forced herself, I chose myself over him. I chose my safety, and I let him suffer. The mountain pulsed violently, a shudder running through the hollow. Emily fell to her knees, gasping, but something shifted in the air. The children stepped back slightly, their small hands lowering, and the whispers softened, almost contemplative. For the first time, the mountain seemed uncertain. Natalie's voice broke the silence, trembling but firm, it doesn't end here. It's testing us. Don't let it take control. Emily felt a spark of defiance amidst the terror. She had confessed everything, laid herself bare, and still stood. She realized that the mountain's power was absolute only if they allowed it to dominate their minds. Fear was its currency, but courage, even trembling, desperate courage, could push back. The hollow seemed to contract, the mountain drawing closer, probing for the next hesitation. Emily straightened, looking at her friends, her face wet with tears but burning with resolve. She didn't know if they would survive, but she understood at last the cruelest truth, the mountain could never truly control them unless they surrendered completely. And then, as if responding to her newfound defiance, the heart of the mountain pulsed once, violently, and the whispers fell silent, leaving an eerie, charged calm. But it was only a pause. Emily knew it. The mountain never truly rested. And the final test, one that would determine whether any of them survived, was still to come. The hollow seemed endless, yet somehow impossibly compressed, the air thick with tension and the scent of damp stone and something metallic that made Emily's stomach twist. Every pulse of the mountain's heart reverberated through the floor beneath her feet, through her bones, and into her mind, a constant reminder that the mountain's will was absolute. For a moment, she feared that even thought itself was no longer private, that every heartbeat, every pang of fear, every memory, was being measured, weighed, and catalogued. Natalie stayed close, her hand gripping Emily's tightly, both of them trembling but unwilling to let go. Around them, the students were silent, wide-eyed, their exhaustion and terror carved plainly into their faces. Even Dr. Callahan, usually authoritative and composed, walked as though each step might be his last, hands white-knuckled on his trekking poles. The mountain was testing them now, measuring not just fear but endurance, probing for cracks in resolve. The hollow narrowed into a jagged passage, rock walls rising like towering sentinels on either side. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the flickering light from the small torches they had managed to salvage. Whispers surged again, softer this time, intimate, threading into Emily's mind with undeniable clarity. Edge, you are close, the final choice. Emily swallowed hard, the blood pounding in her temples. She knew instinctively that the mountain was dragging them towards something that would decide their fate. The air grew colder, denser, almost viscous, pressing against their lungs and slowing their movements. Each breath was laborious, each step heavy, as though the mountain itself were pulling them toward the precipice. They came to a widening ledge that overlooked a vast chasm. Mist swirled from its depths, and Emily couldn't see the bottom, only the suggestion of black nothingness stretching downward endlessly. The mountain's heart pulsed even here, beneath the stone, through the earth itself. Shadows flickered along the edges of the chasm, stretching upward like living tendrils. And then, Emily saw them, the mountain's children, dozens of them, clinging to the edges, their small faces pressed against the stone, eyes glowing with unnatural light, watching, waiting, and somehow knowing. A sudden gust of wind swept across the ledge, and the whispers turned into voices, hundreds of them, overlapping, insistent, commanding. Choose, decide, or be claimed. Emily's knees buckled slightly, and she caught herself on Natalie. The mountain's pull wasn't just physical. It wasn't just psychological. It was a force that reached into her very being, testing her courage, her sanity, her will to survive. She realized, with a cold clarity, that the mountain's hunger was not merely for bodies, it craved submission, obedience, terror, and regret distilled into a living essence. Dr. Callahan stepped forward, trying to project authority, though his voice trembled. We need to stay together. If we scatter, the mountain takes us one by one. We make our choice now, together. The students exchanged fearful glances, each of them acutely aware that hesitation could be fatal. Emily's mind raced. They had survived confession, they had faced the mountain's heart, but the edge now demanded something greater, the courage to act, the willingness to confront the mountain's living will directly. Natalie whispered, voice shaking, Emily, what if it wants more than confessions this time? Emily shook her head. I don't know, but we don't have a choice. It's not just asking anymore. It's demanding. From the swirling mist at the edge of the chasm, a figure emerged. A child, pale and small, with glowing eyes, stepped forward, floating slightly above the mist, suspended as though the chasm itself were holding it. Its gaze fixed on the group, and Emily felt the pressure in her mind intensify. The mountain was speaking through it, its will made manifest. You are at the edge, the child whispered, its voice a chorus of many, each note layered, resonating with dread. Decide, or fall into oblivion. The mountain has fed. It has measured. It has judged. Now, it demands the final choice. Emily's chest constricted. She glanced at her friends. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, reflecting the terror and exhaustion that bound them together. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The mountain had stripped away the illusion of escape. The chasm below, the mist, the whispering children, they were all part of the same entity, one vast intelligence that was alive, aware, and hungry. Step by step, the group moved forward, toward the center of the ledge, where the mountain's heart pulsed with an intensity that made the ground beneath them tremble. Emily's mind screamed in defiance, but her body obeyed, drawn toward the apex as though pulled by invisible chains. The mountain's whispers surged into a crescendo, voices overlapping in a terrifying symphony, submit, confess, choose, or fall, or fall, or fall. Emily turned to Natalie, her voice barely audible over the roar in her head. Hold my hand. Whatever happens, don't let go. Natalie nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, and clutched Emily's hand like a lifeline. They stepped together, approaching the point where the ledge narrowed dangerously, the abyss yawning below them. Every step was agony, every heartbeat a drum of impending doom. The children surged closer, shadows stretching like living claws, pressing against them with invisible weight. Emily understood, with terrifying clarity, what the mountain demanded. It wasn't just confession. It wasn't just fear. It wanted obedience under the threat of annihilation, the ultimate test of their will against a living, intelligent force that fed on terror and despair. And if even one faltered, the mountain would claim them all. Dr. Callahan's voice rang out one final time, cracking under the strain, step together, trust, courage is all we have left. Emily inhaled sharply, forcing herself to focus, to push back against the mountain's pull. The mist swirled around them, thickening, almost solid, and the glowing eyes of the children pressed closer. The mountain's whispers escalated, and the world seemed to contract to the single point of decision: surrender or fall, obey or die, allow the mountain to feed, or fight for a fragment of their lives and sanity. Emily felt the ground tremble beneath her, the mountain thrumming like a heartbeat, and she realized the final confrontation was no longer ahead. It was here, at the edge of oblivion, at the precipice of life and death, sanity and madness, submission and defiance. Every secret, every fear, every choice they had made led to this moment. And then, in a single heartbeat, the mountain paused, as if waiting, listening, judging. The edge of the abyss stretched endlessly before them, mist curling like living fingers, cold and suffocating. Emily's hands were numb, but she clutched Natalie's tightly, their fingers entwined in a desperate lifeline. The mountain's heart pulsed beneath the stone like some immense, sentient organ, each beat resonating through the ledge, through the air, and deep into Emily's bones. The children, its extensions, its conduits, were closer now, their glowing eyes unwavering, their whispers layered into a chorus that vibrated directly inside her skull: decide, obey, submit, or fall. Dr. Callahan stepped forward, unsteady, but resolute. We have survived this far. Whatever it wants, we face it. Together. Emily's chest tightened. Together was no longer enough. The mountain's hunger was absolute, its patience infinite. Every confession, every act of courage or defiance had fed it, shaped it, but it wanted the final act, the ultimate surrender, the deepest truth. A child floated forward from the swirling mist at the abyss's edge, small and pale, eyes burning like embers. The mountain knows you, it whispered, voice impossibly layered, a chorus of all the lost souls it had consumed over the centuries. It knows your fears, your regrets, your secrets. Only one truth remains, the one you cannot bear to face yourself. Emily felt her stomach lurch violently. The mountain wasn't merely testing them. It was probing the core of their very being, their innermost selves, and weighing them against its will. She understood, with terrifying clarity, that it had been shaping their journey, not to kill, not just to terrify, but to bring them here, to force them to confront their ultimate truth. Natalie's voice broke the silence, trembling. Emily, whatever it asks, we have to be honest. We can't lie. Emily nodded, though the fear clawed at her throat. She realized that the mountain's test was personal, psychological, eternal. Every survivor had hidden guilt, shame, fear, every misstep, every secret unspoken. And the mountain thrived on their evasion, their hesitation. The floating child's gaze bore into Emily. You know why it brought you here, it said softly. The mountain doesn't choose randomly. It feeds, yes, but it chooses what it fears most. What you fear, what you hide, it demands you face it. Emily swallowed hard. She felt her heart pounding in her throat as memories surged forward, years of guilt, mistakes, small cruelties, selfish choices. And at the center of it all, the memory of her sister's drowning, the shame that had haunted her ever since. She trembled, knowing this was the ultimate truth the mountain demanded, the deepest, most personal horror she had carried alone. She stepped forward, trembling, toward the very edge of the abyss. The mist curled around her legs like a living thing, cold and insistent, tugging at her. She whispered, voice shaking. I left her. I let her drown. I failed her. I survived while she didn't. That is my truth. The mountain shuddered, a low, vibrating roar that pressed into Emily's chest. The heart pulsed violently, the glow of its veins brightening as though acknowledging her confession. The children moved closer, their small hands hovering over the abyss, waiting. Natalie gripped her hand, tears streaming down her face. It's done, Emily. You've faced it. But the mountain was not done. Its voice, layered and infinite, resonated through the hollow, the chasm, the very air around them. Acknowledgement is not enough. You must accept. You must surrender fully, or all will be claimed. Emily's legs shook violently. She realized now that confession had been only the first step. Acceptance, the conscious, willing surrender to the mountain's will, was the true test. The mountain did not merely feed on guilt or fear, it demanded integration, obedience, submission to its consciousness. To resist fully meant death, but to surrender meant survival, in some limited, horrifying form. Dr. Callahan moved forward, voice trembling but firm. "We accept," he said. "Whatever it is, we submit. We won't resist its will anymore. Not for ourselves, only to survive." Emily and the others nodded, hands joined. The mountain's heart pulsed violently once, twice, then the whispers fell to a low, omnipresent hum. For the first time, the plateau, the mist, the abyss felt still. Not safe, not free, but stable. They were alive, at least for the moment. Then the true horror revealed itself. From the mist, Emily glimpsed shadowed forms, her friends, altered, partially fused with the mountain, their bodies pale, eyes glowing faintly. The mountain had taken pieces of them to stabilize its own heart, integrating fragments of the living to maintain its sentience. Survival came at a cost, the living remained, but part of them belonged to the mountain now, tethered forever to its consciousness. Emily felt a cold shiver as she realized the final truth. The mountain did not merely consume life, it collected essence, integrating guilt, fear, and will into itself. Each person who survived bore a part of the mountain inside them, a whisper in the wind, a pulse in the stone. And the children, the ones who guided them, who whispered, who judged, they were extensions of that collected essence, fragments of the many who had failed or surrendered before. Natalie leaned into Emily, voice shaking. "We're still us, but not entirely. We carry it." Emily nodded, trembling. The abyss below seemed infinite, but the edge was stable now. They had survived, yes, but survival was not freedom. They were bound to the mountain, tethered to its heart, forever aware of its presence, its whispers, its hunger. The floating children moved back into the mist, fading from view, their whispers lingering. "You belong, we all belong, the mountain remembers." Emily looked across the plateau at her friends, their eyes hollow yet alive, faces pale but conscious. They had faced the mountain, confessed, surrendered, and survived, but at a cost none of them would ever fully understand. And above them, the wind howled through the peaks, carrying whispers of the mountain's eternal hunger, promises of judgment yet to come, and a truth that would never leave them, the whispering peak never forgets. They turned away from the edge, descending slowly, hands still clasped, hearts heavy with the weight of what they had survived. And Emily knew, survival had a price, one she would carry for the rest of her life, as would the mountain itself. The mountain's heart continued to pulse beneath them, unseen, eternal, waiting for the next lost souls to wander close enough to hear its whispers. The survivors escaped physical death but became part of the mountain's consciousness. The mountain collects guilt, fear, and essence, forever tethering those who survive to its living will. The final shocking truth, survival is never complete freedom, and the mountain never ceases its hunger.